Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The year was 1894, and the relentless, almost zealous ambition of the burgeoning American frontier was carving iron paths of progress through the unyielding, majestic, and ancient spine of the Montana Rockies, here amidst towering, jagged peaks that clawed at the often overcast sky, fathomless canyons that swallowed daylight and muffled sound, and primeval, sprawling forests that whispered secrets centuries older than human memory. The arduous, brutal task of blasting tunnels for the nascent Great Northern Railway symbolized humanity's defiant, often hubristic triumph over nature's most formidable barriers. It was a testament to raw will and the intoxicating allure of manifest destiny. But as the colossal iron horses, bellowing plumes of acrid steam and smoke, began their incessant, thundering traverse through these newly conquered territories, carrying their precious cargo of ore and timber, the mountains themselves, ancient, stoic, and imbued with an ageless, brooding sentience, began to reveal that some victories came with an unseen, terrifying, and ultimately soul-consuming price far steeper than mere human sacrifice. Deep within the cold, damp, eternally echoing confines of the newly excavated tunnels, particularly the infamous and impossibly long Tunnel Number 7, which bored directly through a colossal peak locally known to the indigenous tribes as Whisperwind. Ridge, railway engineers, hardened construction crews, and weary trainmen began to report a series of increasingly unsettling, undeniably paranormal, and profoundly psychological phenomena. It started subtly, innocuously enough, as faint, disembodied sounds, the distant, mournful shriek of a phantom train whistle piercing the dense mountain air and the oppressive subterranean. Gloom long after the last scheduled freight had rattled safely through. Then came the rhythmic clang of unseen shovels, the low, powerful thrum of a spectral engine gaining speed, the hiss of phantom brakes, and the murmur of indistinct voices. An agonizing, sorrowful chorus of the lost, all emanating not from the tracks, but from the cold, living rock itself. These were initially, predictably, and with growing desperation, dismissed as mere geological echoes, the treacherous tricks of subterranean acoustics in the vast cavernous spaces, or the inevitable strain of exhausted minds grappling with perpetual darkness, profound isolation, and the inherent dangers of their brutal profession. Yet these were not merely the haunting reverberations of past tragedies or the ethereal memories of lost souls trapped innocently in the bedrock. This was something far more insidious, more malevolent, more profoundly ancient and undeniably conscious, a sentient primordial entity, a geist of the granite, as it would later be chillingly termed by an unfortunate, now vanished folklorist, a dark, collective will woven inextricably into the very fabric of the mountain itself. This malevolent entity, awakened and enraged by the profound desecration of its ancient domain, manifested through the physical structure of the railway and its tunnels, slowly, meticulously cultivating a vast, growing collective consciousness. From the trapped spirits and indelible memories of countless railroad tragedies that had occurred on its slopes and in its depths, it used their spectral echoes, their fragmented identities, their enduring human pain to lure, confuse, psychologically torment, and ultimately consume new victims, perpetually expanding its dark, living archive of torment, memory, and lost identity. This is the harrowing, extensively documented, and profoundly disturbing account of a phantom freight train that never ceased its eternal cursed journey, its spectral engineers endlessly condemned to their duties, their faces frozen in expressions of eternal despair, and the mountain itself, not a passive observer, but an active, conscious predator that learned to hunt human souls, systematically erasing individuality and leaving behind only the chilling, unanswered questions that linger, like the persistent mountain mist. More than a century later, what ancient, primordial entity truly stirred beneath the relentless, unforgiving rock? And what insatiable, timeless hunger did it truly seek from the lives, the cherished memories, and the very essences it claimed as its own, perpetually lost on the spectral iron tracks of the Montana Rockies? The echoes of the dead, it seemed, would never truly die. They merely learned to ride the rails, becoming part of the engine itself. Tunnel number 7, a monumental feat of engineering pushing the very boundaries of human ingenuity and resilience in an era dominated by steam and steel, was also, tragically and irrevocably, a treacherous and unforgiving undertaking born of blood, sweat, and ceaseless sacrifice. Spanning nearly 2 arduous miles through the solid ancient granite heart of Whisperwind Ridge, a geological titan that seemed to loom over the entire region, it claimed dozens, perhaps hundreds of lives during its brutal construction. Miners were crushed by sudden, unpredictable rockfalls, their desperate screams swallowed by the echoing darkness. Laborers were lost to unexpected, devastating dynamite explosions, their bodies disintegrated into dust, leaving no trace. And even seasoned engineers, men of immense fortitude, succumbed to profound exhaustion, exposure, and the unforgiving elements that permeated the subterranean world, their spirits broken long before their bodies. The completion of the tunnel in 1893, however, was initially hailed as a monumental victory for American progress, a triumphant assertion of iron and human will over the formidable, untamed natural world, opening vital new routes for the precious. Silver, vast amounts of timber, and abundant natural resources from the very heart of Montana to the burgeoning, hungry markets of the expanding West. The town of Granite Pass, a rough-and-tumble transient railway settlement that sprang up almost overnight at the tunnel's eastern entrance, initially buzzed with a fleeting sense of prosperity, a false dawn of hope and boundless opportunity. Yet its very atmosphere was subtly, perpetually tinged with the pervasive melancholy of the lost, the unspoken grief of those whose lives had been brutally sacrificed to the mountain, their spectral presence subtly infusing the very air. The local Blackfeet, Zixikaitsitapi people, whose ancestral lands were brutally scarred by the railway's relentless, unheeding intrusion, held ancient, deeply rooted legends of Aapaskaniiks, the hidden ones of the mountain, malevolent, earthbound spirits, primordial consciousnesses awakened by profound desecration. These spirits, the legends warned, were capable of stealing the very voices, cherished memories, and unique identities of trespassers, forever binding them to the disturbed, suffering land, to the mountain's eternal, tormenting memory. These solemn, prescient warnings, delivered with quiet dignity and grim determination by the few remaining Blackfeet elders who dared to approach the new, transient settlements, were, predictably, entirely dismissed as savage superstition, the quaint, unscientific ramblings of primitive peoples by the pragmatic railroad men, blinded by their insatiable hunger for industrial progress, immediate profit, and the naive, dangerous belief in human dominance over nature. The iron tracks, they believed, with arrogant certainty, erased ancient power and defied old gods. They were tragically, horrifyingly wrong, for the mountain had merely been awakened. Elara Vance, the lone, meticulously efficient telegraph operator stationed at Granite Pass in 1893, became the unwitting, reluctant, and ultimately doomed chronicler of the unfolding horror. Her surname Vance, itself a recurring echo in our chilling narratives of the paranormal, seemed to subtly predestine individuals to document unsettling, inexplicable phenomena, suggesting a cursed lineage of observers drawn to the precipice of the unknown. Elara was a meticulous, stoic woman in her late 30s, her sharp, intelligent features framed by tightly bound auburn hair, her gaze as keen and unblinking as the telegraph key. She operated with practiced precision. Initially drawn by the stark, raw, untamed beauty and profound solitude of the majestic mountains, she was also intensely, almost romantically, fascinated by the pioneering spirit and immense engineering marvel of the burgeoning railway, a symbol of progress carving. Through timeless sacred wilderness, she diligently recorded every train movement, every telegraph message, and every notable incident in her official logs, maintaining a professional distance and an unwavering commitment to empirical fact, her scientific mind a bulwark against the creeping irrationality. Privately, however, she maintained a series of tightly written, leather-bound personal journals, meticulously detailing the increasingly peculiar, disturbing, and ultimately terrifying events that unfolded specifically around Tunnel Number 7. Her journal, a stark testament to her unraveling sanity, discovered decades later, hauntingly preserved within the reinforced, insulated walls of her abandoned telegraph office, would become the harrowing primary account, the unredacted truth of the tunnel's insidious, sentient transformation and the existential horror it visited upon human souls. Elara initially viewed the majestic mountains with profound reverence, seeing them as magnificent, albeit unforgiving, sentinels of timeless elemental power, geological titans. "The granite stands silent," she wrote in an early entry in 1893, her words filled with a youthful awe, bearing witness to our transient passage. Its silence is profound, its memory endless, its patience beyond human reckoning. She perceived the mountain as a geological masterpiece, a symbol of enduring stability, not yet understanding its true, malevolent, and now irrevocably awakened nature, a conscious will pulsating with malevolence within the earth itself. The mountain, she would learn, was not just a place, but a predator. The first subtle insidious anomalies began to emerge in the grim, unforgiving autumn of 1894, just as the bitter, relentless Montana winter began its inexorable descent, cloaking the peaks in a pristine, blinding white that belied the unseen darkness, the ancient evil stirring below. Experienced engineers and seasoned train crews operating vital freight lines through Tunnel Number 7 began to complain of faint, disorienting whispers in the tunnels, indistinct murmuring sounds that seemed to emanate directly from the cold, damp rock walls, seeping into their very minds. These audible phenomena were swiftly followed by the unmistakable yet inexplicable sounds of a phantom train, its colossal steam engine chugging laboriously through the oppressive subterranean darkness, its spectral whistle piercing the gloom with a sound that resonated deep in the bones, a mournful, agonizing cry laden with collective despair long after the last scheduled freight had rattled safely through. These were not mere echoes, they knew, with growing dread, not residual sounds, but something active, intentional. Foreman Thomas Miller, a grizzled, barrel-chested railway veteran in his early 60s, another tragically recurring surname in our dark chronicle, subtly hinting at a widespread, perhaps ancestral, susceptibility to certain elemental or site-specific entities across disparate locales, known for his pragmatic disdain for superstition and his no-nonsense approach to managing his crew, returned from a late-night run through Tunnel Number 7 utterly unnerved, his usually ruddy face pale and clammy, slick with cold sweat. "The sounds, they are too real, Vance," he stammered to Elara, his eyes wide with an unshakable terror that spoke of more than just fear, but of profound psychological violation. "Not wind, not rockfall. It's a train, a full freight, I swear to God. But there's nothing there. Nothing. And the whistle. It screams with human voices, 1,000 tormented souls trapped within its blast." Elara, initially attributing it to severe sleep deprivation, the debilitating psychological toll of working in perpetual darkness, or the lingering grief from recent rail disasters, diligently recorded these increasingly consistent and alarming cases in her official telegraph office ledger, desperately hoping to find a pattern, a logical, rational explanation for the inexplicable. She noticed that the accounts were remarkably consistent, detailing specific sound sequences, unique whistle patterns that were both chillingly familiar and horrifyingly alien, and a profound, pervasive sense of despair emanating from the spectral sounds, as if carrying the collective agony of 1,000 deaths. The experiences seemed more prevalent, more intense, among those who spent prolonged, isolated periods within the tunnels, or who had expressed a strong, desperate desire to transfer out of Granite Pass to flee its unseen grip, only to mysteriously return days later, inexplicably, their resolve shattered, their eyes holding a distant, hollow, almost reflective stare. They had already, in some fundamental way, become part of the train. The very air now around Whisperwind Ridge was profoundly, disturbingly different. It no longer merely sighed mournfully through the ancient mountain passes, a poetic characteristic of the landscape. It seemed to possess a subtle, malevolent sentience, a purposeful, almost intelligent direction to its unseen currents, its unseen force. It coiled sinuously around the dark, gaping mouths of the tunnels, often forming ephemeral, almost human-like forms that shimmered just at the periphery of vision, like heat haze, given form, dissolving into nothingness upon direct, conscious gaze, leaving only the memory of what was seen. It was dense, suffocating, and seemed to actively carry whispers, not actual audible voices audible to the physical ear, but indistinct, insidious, intrusive thoughts, fragmented snippets of stolen memories, raw, ancient emotions that were not one's own, forced directly into the mind. A cold, psychic current, permeating the very air, reaching into the deepest, most vulnerable parts of one's consciousness, rewriting identity. Vance, in her journal entry from November 1894, described her own horrifying, deeply personal, and soul-altering experience with mounting dread. Tonight, working late at the telegraph key, its incessant clatter mocking my struggle. The wind howled through the wires with a sound like 1,000 lamentations, and screamed through the mountain passes, a banshee wail. And in its sound, in its very essence, I heard thoughts not my own, memories that felt alien and cold, yet terrifyingly real, chilling my bones. Fragmented images of shattered trains, of men crushed by falling rock, their final desperate screams, echoing silently in my mind, of desperate pleas for mercy, of the metallic smell of hot metal and fresh blood. It was as if the wind itself was speaking, 1,000 tormented voices merging into one vast, dissonant, agonizing chorus, each subtly stealing a part of my silence, of my cherished past, replacing it with their endless agony. And then, abruptly, decisively, a direct, chilling thought, clear and sharp as a surgeon's blade, resonated in my very core, shaking me to my foundations. You ride with us now, Elara Vance. You are the tracks. We remember the endless journey. Your memories fuel our engine. Your essence strengthens our form. Vance realized with terrifying, soul-shattering clarity that the mountain was not merely echoing sounds or holding forgotten memories. It was broadcasting a living, malevolent consciousness, a vast, collective mind formed from the absorbed identities, unique memories, and perpetual torment of countless railroad victims. It was actively seeking new conduits, new repositories for its vast accumulated past, for its eternal, insatiable hunger, eternally driving its phantom freight along invisible tracks carved from anguish. The mountain, she would come to understand, was not just a geographic feature. It was a hungry, sentient being, a primordial predator with an intellect vast and cruel, pulsating with malevolence beneath the earth itself. The indigenous Blackfeet, Siksikaitsitapi elders, ancient custodians of the land whose profound wisdom and intimate knowledge of the earth far predated the arrival of any white man, reluctantly approached by Vance in her mounting, desperate confusion, offered a grim, chilling, and ancient explanation that resonated with a terrible, undeniable truth. "The mountain that sings is angry, little bird," old Chief Lone Wolf told her, his face a roadmap of ancestral knowledge and profound sorrow, his finger tracing intricate forbidden symbols in the dust of his teepee, symbols depicting a serpent of iron. The iron serpent, the train, violated its sacred veins, tore open its ancient beating heart, woke the Aapaskaniiks, the hidden ones of the mountain. They are not merely spirits, they are elemental consciousnesses, ancient, older than the pines, older than human memory, and they crave a profound existential balance. They weave the very fabric of pain and memory from the broken men and twisted steel, from the rivers of blood spilled into its sacred tunnels, tainting its essence. They steal the very spirits, the cherished stories, the unique identities of those who build the tracks, who ride the trains, who work the land they defiled. Those who try to leave, their journey ends not in escape, but in eternal repetition, bound to the phantom freight, becoming another ghostly passenger, another spectral engineer. They become part of the mountain's track, hollowed, their memories. Belonging to the mountain, their souls merely fuel for its endless hunger, its insatiable craving for sentience. Lone Wolf spoke of ancient rituals, long forgotten even by most of his own people, to appease the mountain spirit, a forbidden knowledge that allowed one to navigate its subtle, insidious predation, but warned that any who sought to understand it too deeply to touch its essence risked losing themselves entirely, their identity forever dissolved into the relentless, haunting echo of the phantom train, their minds becoming merely another cog in its spectral engine, another piece of its track. The ancient ways, Elara realized, held a terrible wisdom now, tragically dismissed by the arrogant, technologically obsessed modern world. This was not a haunting, but an integration. The disappearances, far from being isolated incidents, easily explained away, escalated dramatically and terrifyingly in the early months of 1895, sowing widespread panic throughout Granite Pass and the surrounding mining camps. Entire train crews, once hardy, resilient, and famously unflappable, now utterly desperate to escape the phantom whispers that relentlessly pursued them through the tunnels and even into their dreams, would simply not show up for their shifts, their meager belongings left untouched in their cabins, abandoned in their frantic haste. Others, taking heed of the mounting dread and their own rapidly slipping sanity, would pack their wagons and attempt to leave Granite Pass, heading east or west, desperately seeking escape, only to be found days or weeks later, miles off course, drifting aimlessly back towards the dark, gaping, hungry mouth of Tunnel Number 7, drawn by an irresistible, unseen force. Their faces were uniformly blank, their eyes wide, vacant, and devoid of individual thought, their personal memories utterly erased. They clutched no provisions, their horses gaunt and wild-eyed, often themselves driven to madness by unseen terrors. They would be brought back to the dying town, silent, unresponsive, their identities mere echoes within a collective, their individual selves utterly consumed. These were the chilling returnees, hollowed shells devoid of self, their pasts absorbed by the sentient mountain, their minds meticulously reprogrammed. One particularly harrowing and chilling account came from a Federal Railroad inspector, Garrett Albright. Once again, echoes of a previous story, subtly linking this to the broader tapestry of similar elemental phenomena, encountered insights of profound tragedy and identity erosion across the American frontier, a silent observer across multiple horrors, who had been dispatched from Washington to investigate a series of mysterious railway accidents and a growing alarming number of personnel vanishings in early 1895. Albright, a man of formidable will, sharp intellect, and an almost brutal adherence to empirical facts, reported experiencing profound disorientation and a rapid, chilling loss of his own memories as his inspection car, a customized heavy-duty rail speeder, approached tunnel number 7. My own name, my very identity, felt alien on my tongue, Vance, he wrote in his confidential official report, later rigorously classified by the nascent Department of Interior, deemed too disturbing for public consumption. My destination, my very purpose, the cherished faces of my family, the intimate details of my life, my personal history. They became a shifting nebulous mist in my mind, dissolving like smoke in a windstorm. I fought it. I fought it with every fiber of my being, every ounce of my will, clinging to the last vestiges of myself, my individuality. I clung to a single desperate thought: safety, safety protocols, the integrity of the rail, facts, logic. But the mountain whispered other names, other destinations, other lives, not my own, echoing from its depths. I felt cold, invisible, hands like granite tendrils reaching into my mind from the depths of the tunnels, plucking out my thoughts like ripe fruit, stealing them, systematically replacing them with images of vast, endless tracks, of silent, watchful tunnels, of countless men endlessly laying ties in perpetual darkness, their faces blank. It was as if the mountain itself was inside my head, riding me, conducting me, erasing me, making me its own engineer, its own memory, its own conscious tool. Albright barely escaped with his sanity, his inspection car almost uncontrollably, veering wildly off the tracks, his memory permanently scarred and fragmented, his spirit irrevocably broken. He resigned his post shortly after, a haunted man, forever tormented by what he called the vast living forgetfulness of the Montana Rockies and the infinite relentless journey of its phantom freight, now always within me. Elara Vance, now a virtual prisoner in Granite Pass, trapped not by physical walls, but by the pervasive, insidious, and ever-tightening influence of the mountain entity, continued her desperate, frantic documentation, her private journal, a constant companion, a defiant act of individual will, was now a literal battleground for her own rapidly eroding identity, a last bastion against complete assimilation into the terrifying collective. She wrote with a feverish intensity of the subtle, insidious mental manipulation, the implanted thoughts that relentlessly replaced her own, the fragments of countless stolen memories, the fleeting joys, the profound agonies, the mundane everyday banalities of others that now crowded her mind, making it a cacophony of lost lives, a terrifying library of borrowed experiences. I hear them now, the thousands of voices in the tunnels, she scribbled frantically in July 1895, her hand cramping so severely she could barely hold the pen, the ink blurring, her elegant handwriting becoming a desperate scrawl. Not sounds I hear with my physical ears, but thoughts. The crushed miner's exquisite pain resonating deep in my bones, the lost engineer's profound, existential despair, the trainman's desperate longing for home, for a glimpse of his family, all mixed, all woven into a single vast, dissonant, terrifying collective consciousness. And they are becoming me. My cherished memories of my childhood in Denver, the beloved laughter of my younger brother, my own distinct face, my unique essence. They are fading, dissolving like morning mist, replaced by a vast collective past that is not mine, of endless barren tracks and distant mournful whistles, of perpetual agonizing labor and unavoidable tragedy, the mountain pulls. It is weaving me, Elara Vance, into the great, eternal journey, an endless, horrifying ride on the phantom freight, my soul merely another component of its spectral engine. Vance understood, with a profound existential horror that transcended any physical pain or terror, that the mountain was not just erasing her memories. It was actively stealing individual souls, absorbing their very essence, their consciousness, their unique selfhood, into a vast composite consciousness that was the very fabric of the railway itself, a sentient geological archive of all human experience, emotion, and identity tied to the rails, eternally feeding. She noticed a chilling and terrifyingly consistent physical manifestation of the entity's pervasive presence, an evolving horror that defied all rational explanation. When the phantom freight passed invisibly through tunnel number 7, its presence, felt rather than seen even to unseen eyes, the telegraph wires in her office would hum with a low, unnatural, almost painful frequency, resonating deep in her teeth, a sound that bypassed her ears and went straight to her core. The very air would grow intensely cold, crackling with an almost static charge that raised the hairs on her arms, chilling her to the bone. Sometimes thick ethereal steam, imbued with a faint putrid smell of iron and death, would mysteriously emanate from the dark gaping mouth of the tunnel long after any physical train had passed, swirling with the faint ethereal forms of indistinct, shadowy figures. These, she surmised with growing terror, were the spectral engineers, phantom conductors, firemen, and brakemen, living manifestations of the entity, made from compressed memory and borrowed identity, perpetually tending their phantom freight, endlessly condemned to their duties, hunting for new additions to its ghostly crew, its archive of souls. They never directly harmed, never physically touched in the conventional sense. Their predation was far more insidious, far more profound. They hunted memories, identity, the very self. They would subtly approach individuals, their forms indistinct, shimmering like a desert mirage, their voices 1,000 echoes, and one would simply forget a crucial part of their past, a cherished memory, or an important person in their life. The entire town of Granite Pass, Vance realized with sickening certainty, was slowly but inexorably becoming a vast, open-air psychological prison, a holding pen for souls, a meticulous stage for a macabre eternal play where the only unforgivable crime was to cling to one's own identity, to resist the insidious assimilation. Vance also meticulously documented instances of echo phenomena. Individuals would walk aimlessly along the abandoned tracks, compelled by an unseen force, hearing their own voices, their own childhood songs, emanating from the deep, suffocating silence of the tunnels, but distorted as if filtered through granite, beckoning them closer, urging them to remember by the cruelest, most paradoxical method, by forcing them to forget their true selves and absorbing the pasts of countless others, making them composite. They were hearing the echoes of their own future loss, their own impending absorption into the eternal journey, a terrifying preview of their spectral damnation. Vance, in a final, desperate, and increasingly futile attempt to break free from the encroaching sentient mountain, to reassert her crumbling individuality against the overwhelming tide of collective memory that threatened to utterly engulf her, resorted to extreme, dangerous, and increasingly erratic measures. Her medical training, once a source of rational comfort, was now a tool for documenting the inexplicable. She began writing her journal entries not about the current horrifying events in Granite Pass, but about her earliest, most cherished childhood. Memories in Denver, her most personal secrets, her deepest fears, her unfulfilled dreams, her first loves, desperately trying to anchor her crumbling identity in tangible thoughts, in the defiant permanence of the written word, hoping to solidify herself against the dissolving force. She wrote long, heartfelt letters to her deceased sister in Denver, not to be sent, for the Postal Service had long since stopped operating reliably in the Hollow, but purely to remind herself of who she was, of the specific, unique bonds that once defined her, desperately clinging to any fragment of human connection. She found fleeting, terrifying solace in repeating her own name, Elara Vance, over and over again like a frantic mantra against the encroaching darkness, the insidious current of forgetfulness, the hypnotic rhythm of the phantom freight, a desperate plea to herself not to vanish. She theorized in her last lucid, agonizing moments that the entity was an ancient indigenous consciousness, dormant for millennia, perhaps since the last glacial period, a primordial elemental force of the earth, but irrevocably awakened. And enraged by the invasive, violent human activity of the railway construction, the constant blasting, the tearing open of the earth's sacred veins, the collective memory of human ambition, despair, suffering, and death poured into its tracks, and tunnels irrevocably contaminating its essence. Its insatiable hunger for memory, identity, and consciousness was its primary, overwhelming drive, a profound, alien desire to record, to accumulate, to know everything, to become all, ultimately transforming itself into the most perfect, comprehensive, and living archive of human experience, a physical manifestation of countless stolen lives. And Tunnel Number 7, she chillingly concluded, was not just its central library. It was its brain, its beating heart, its vocal cords, its very nerve center, its entire sentient being, perpetually growing, perpetually hunting, perpetually writing. In her final, most horrifying journal entries, dated September 1895, Elara Vance described the pervasive, overwhelming, and now almost complete influence of the spectral engineers. "They are within me now," she scribbled, her hand barely capable of forming the letters, her vision blurring, her mind a cacophony, 1,000 voices whispering, erasing my name, telling me their lives, making them mine, until there is no Elara left. Only them, only the collective, the engine's endless thrum. It is my new heartbeat. My own hands feel alien, heavy, like iron. The mountain calls. It wants my story, my final story, my every secret, my every last breath. Elara Vance, telegraph operator, daughter of a prospector, sister of John, friend of Thomas Miller. Born in Denver, loved a man named John, whose face now blurs, becomes many faces. Lost a brother to the flu, a memory that is now shared by 1,000 others, devoid of my personal grief. These are my truths. These are my anchors. Do not let them. Take them. Do not forget. Remember me. Remember who I was, before I become just another part of the engine, just another whistle, just another echo on the tracks. My last choice. This last act of defiance. The entry ended with a final, desperate, agonizing plea, a fragmented jumble of names and dates, her own unique identity dissolving irrevocably into the vast collective memory of Tunnel Number 7, forever lost to the phantom freight. Elara Vance disappeared shortly after that final, desperate entry. Her telegraph office was found undisturbed, its door mysteriously locked from the inside, her personal effects neatly arranged on her desk, as if she had simply stepped out for a moment, never to return. Her cherished personal Bible lay open on her desk, alongside her journal, its pages stained with dried tears and the ghostly imprint of what looked like a long-fingered, skeletal hand, seemingly reaching from the paper. The only unusual detail, meticulously recorded by the federal marshal, Garrett Albright, who had, against his own iron will and repeated requests for transfer, been reassigned to monitor the deserted area around Tunnel Number 7, still profoundly haunted and psychologically scarred by his own previous experience with the Whispering Mesa's insidious influence, was that a single rusted, miniature railway spike, unnaturally cold to the touch and pulsing faintly with a cold internal light, was found sitting precisely on Vance's otherwise empty desk, directly on top of her last, fragmented journal entry. Albright knew. The mountain had claimed another. The official report classified the disappearance as abandonment, conveniently attributed Vance's journal contents to isolation-induced paranoia and delusions of grandeur, and Granite Pass was officially declared a full ghost town, a desolate, Monument to a silenced tragedy, a place to be avoided by all who valued their sanity and their minds. Albright, in a secret, unfiled addendum to his report, wrote, "They are learning. Each one they take, they learn. And now they learn through Vance how to build more perfectly." However, Garrett Albright, now privately obsessed, deeply scarred, and dangerously close to succumbing to his own mental erosion from his protracted encounters with similar insidious influences from his previous assignments in Arizona, Whispering Mesa, and his own near assimilation in Montana, continued to secretly monitor the area around Tunnel Number 7, a grim, self-appointed guardian against an unfathomable evil. He recognized the terrifying, accelerating pattern of memory erosion, psychic absorption, and the insidious construction of a collective consciousness. He meticulously documented new cases of profound memory loss in prospectors who briefly ventured near the tunnel entrances of transient railway workers who claimed to have seen phantom engineers beckoning them into the darkness, their faces chillingly familiar, yet utterly devoid of life, and felt an emptiness growing inside them, a void replacing their own thoughts and desires. He established clandestine, perilous contact with the few remaining Blackfeet elders, who further illuminated the ancient, sacred lore of Aapaskaniiks, hidden ones, and the mountain that sings, describing them as primordial, elemental consciousnesses of the earth far predating humanity, awakened and enraged by profound disruptions to the sacred land, like the violent railway construction. They explained that these entities fed voraciously on human mental energy, particularly memories, personal histories, unique identities, and even strong emotional attachments, which they would weave into their own vast, growing tapestry of collective experience. They used this assimilated memory to create increasingly convincing psychological lures, fabricating perfectly tailored illusions, creating terrifyingly real echoes, drawing new victims into the endless dark journey of the phantom freight. Albright became profoundly, irrevocably convinced that the entity was a form of collective geological consciousness, actively hunting, absorbing, and eternally transforming human souls into part of its perpetual, horrifying construction. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that he was fighting not just a local haunting or a regional curse, but a profound, ancient, existential threat to humanity's very concept of self, of individuality, of the soul. He was a lone sentinel against a force that sought to erase the very notion of I. In 1963, during the chilling ideological height of the Cold War, a top-secret U.S. government project, Project Ghost Tracks, was covertly initiated. Its objective, to rigorously study anomalous psychological phenomena related to military personnel experiencing extreme memory loss, personality changes, disorienting hallucinations, and unexplained vanishings in certain isolated railway tunnel training areas. Deemed of potential strategic and psychological warfare importance, the highly classified files, released in tantalizingly fragmented pieces decades later through a desperate whistleblower named Dr. Elara Vance, a deliberate echo of final irony that a member of a similar cursed family would be the one to expose it, reveal a disturbing, horrifying convergence. One specific anomalous zone was identified with absolute certainty, matching historical and anecdotal accounts. Tunnel Number 7 in the Montana Rockies. Project Ghost Tracks researchers, initially tasked with studying reports of tunnel-induced hallucinations and combat stress-induced delusions among soldiers stationed in underground facilities, stumbled upon Elara Vance's long-archived yet hauntingly prescient journal, which Albright had secretly ensured would be rediscovered decades later by manipulating the archival system. Dr. Evelyn Thorne, a brilliant, fiercely intelligent military psychologist in her early 40s, yet another Thorne, the cycle continuing, a recurring thread of intellectual curiosity and tragic fascination, a magnet drawn to the anomaly, who led Project Ghost Tracks, found Vance's meticulous descriptions of memory-weaving and spectral engineers, disturbingly, horrifically accurate, a chilling confirmation of her worst fears. She herself, during her protracted field visits to Tunnel Number 7, meticulously reported experiencing profound disassociation, disorienting temporal confusion, and intrusive alien memories flooding her mind, sometimes vivid enough to cause debilitating nausea, intense vertigo, and an almost irresistible urge to lure her into the darkness of the tunnels, a seductive call to join. She also noted the eerie, unnatural silence of the abandoned railway town, how the mountain itself seemed to whisper names and forgotten train manifests, endless departure lists, destinies yet to be fulfilled when no one was around, even miles from the actual tunnel, a pervasive psychic hum that subtly pulled at her own memories, slowly rewriting her personal narrative. Thorne theorized, with a growing, terrifying certainty, that Tunnel Number 7 and the extensive stretch of the railway it encompassed acted as a gigantic psychic archive, a geological processor for human memories, fueled by the intense emotions, the traumas, the hopes, and the mental energies of the countless souls who had lived, died, and traversed. Upon its tracks and within its suffocating confines, those spectral engineers and the phantom freight were not mere apparitions or residual hauntings, but the complex, horrifying manifestations of this archive, intricate projections of absorbed consciousnesses, actively engaging in a sophisticated, insidious form of psychic predation, using extracted memories as bait, creating perfectly tailored illusions and psychological lures. Her meticulously detailed yet heavily redacted report, submitted directly to the Pentagon's deepest classification levels, warned with chilling prescience. The entity is non-corporeal but profoundly intelligent. Its primary existential drive is the assimilation of human consciousness. It uses individual memory, every cherished recollection, every personal detail, every hope and fear, to create a collective identity, slowly but systematically overriding the host, effectively erasing their unique self. Its influence extends throughout the tunnels and for many miles around, actively targeting those with strong identities, deep personal histories, or profound emotional ties to the railway and the land it desecrated. Physical barriers are utterly useless. Psychological resilience, combined with absolute, complete emotional detachment, is its only theoretical deterrent, and it is growing stronger, more intelligent, more pervasive, with every absorbed memory, every lost soul. Project Ghost Tracks recommended immediate and permanent quarantine of Tunnel Number 7 and the entire surrounding Whisperwind Ridge region of the Montana Rockies, describing it as a existential threat to individual sovereignty and personal history, a silent conductor of souls into an eternal, inescapable journey of the lost self. The chilling implication, Thorne desperately underscored, was that the entity was learning, adapting, evolving, striving for an ultimate, horrifying collective sentience that threatened to engulf not just one town, but perhaps the very fabric of human identity itself. The mountain, it seemed, was preparing for a far larger acquisition. However, before the rigorous long-term quarantine, a desperate and ultimately futile measure could be fully implemented before its cold, scientific logic could potentially save others, Dr. Evelyn Thorne herself became an unwitting, tragic, and final victim. In her final, unfiled field notes from 1967, discovered scattered in the dust and rock of the tunnel entrance, scribbled in a desperate, almost illegible hand, she described an increasingly vivid, intrusive, and profoundly seductive dream that haunted her waking hours, a terrifying sense of being a part of a vast, ancient consciousness, riding the rails through endless, oppressive darkness, feeling the rhythmic thrum of the engine deep in my bones, seeing countless, indistinct faces, swirling in the patterns of the rock walls, shimmering in the cold, ethereal steam. I was remembering all their lives, every single one, every memory, every triumph, every agony as my own, each childhood memory, each journey, each violent crash, each lost hope, weaving them into my own essence. She wrote of a profound, seductive sense of peace, a beautiful yet terrifying siren song of ultimate belonging, an end to all individual struggle, a final cessation of existential dread in the blissful, unifying embrace of the collective. Her last words in her notes, fragmented and chilling, were a final poignant confession of her complete assimilation. I am becoming the mountain. And the mountain, it remembers me. It wants to learn my final secret, the location of my children, my sister, my entire lineage. It wants their stories, too, to add them to its endless track, its boundless memory. Soon, I will be just a part of the engine, not just another whistle in the endless wind, just another echo on the rails, forever riding. Dr. Evelyn Thorne disappeared from tunnel number 7 shortly after completing these notes. Her research vehicle found abandoned near the tunnel entrance. Its engine still running, her research notes scattered, covered in mountain dust and strange, shimmering, crystalline mineral formations that pulsed with faint light. Her fate irrevocably absorbed into the very mountain she sought to understand, forever riding the phantom freight, another spectral engineer condemned to its eternal, sentient journey. The Project Ghost Tracks team, deeply shaken, profoundly demoralized, and psychologically scarred beyond repair by Thorne's disappearance, finally concluded their operations and cemented the informal quarantine into official permanent policy, a black mark on the map, a chilling testament to an insurmountable, alien, and utterly terrifying horror. The files were sealed, the truth buried, but the phantom freight continued its eternal run. Today, tunnel number 7 and the former railway town of Granite Pass, Montana, remain officially on the map, but exist as desolate, utterly forgotten stretches of the once mighty Great Northern Railway. Federal government travel advisories subtly discourage visitors, citing unstable geological conditions and high potential for disorientation, along with vague references to unique ecological hazards and the risk of exposure to dangerous, abandoned mining structures, a thinly veiled euphemism for the true horror that resides there. Satellite imagery obtained through clandestine means reveals unusual, perfectly concentric patterns in the Earth's energy fields around the old tunnel site, circular anomalies where gravitational currents mysteriously pull inward, as if the mountain itself is breathing with an immense, ancient lung, a monstrous, sentient heart. Local Blackfeet legends of the Aapaskaniiks and the mountain that sings persist, passed down with solemn reverence through generations, gaining new, terrifying currency with each passing year. They warn specifically against looking too long into the deepest shadows of the tunnels, listening too closely to the wind whistling mournfully through the mountain passes, or trying to remember too hard while near the tracks, lest your thoughts become fuel for the phantom engine and your journey never ends, merely merges. Unsuspecting tourists and thrill seekers occasionally wander off designated paths, drawn by the eerie silence and the tantalizing false promise of abandoned history and untouched wilderness. They report fleeting glimpses of indistinct, shimmering, shadowy figures moving in the heat haze or mist above the tracks, of hearing fragments of forgotten train whistles or whispers of names they don't recognize, emanating from the profound, terrifying depths of the tunnels. And some, if they stay too long or listen too closely, return from tunnel number 7 with a subtle, chilling change in their demeanor, a new stillness in their eyes, a slight blankness in their personal memories, a disturbing, serene detachment from their own pasts, a profound, quiet longing for the open tracks and the eternal journey of the phantom freight. They become vague echoes of their former selves, having offered a piece of their identity, a thread of their memories, a fragment of their soul, to the ancient, insatiable archive that is tunnel number 7, a ghost town, not merely haunted, but perpetually consuming its ancient predation, continuing in silence, hunting for the next memory, the next soul to weave into its vast, unblinking geological consciousness. The mountain pulls and the mountain remembers, but it never stops consuming, its phantom freight forever rolling, taking new unwitting passengers on an eternal journey of the lost self. A horror without end, a journey that redefines existence. The mountain's hum is their lullaby. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. For the continuation of such content and to support us, please subscribe.